What were you like as a teenager? Were you shy? Maybe you were on top of the world and everybody loved you. Did you have it all together? Maybe you had nothing together. Perhaps you wanted to know what your identity was, if anybody cared, if anybody loved you. But then you become a young adult and you're confused and you're wondering, what is my purpose? Why did I go to college? Why did I graduate from high school? Where am I going with my life? If these are any of the questions that you had when you were younger, or maybe you are in one of those stages right now, today's guest, Benjamin Crawshaw, has a ministry and a message for you. He is a student ministry pastor and he works with Trueface.org. They help you find your identity in Christ. This was a very meaningful conversation for me. In the middle of this, I had a wow moment for what has been one of my struggles in my youth. I had to have him on, especially during this tribute to masculinity, because there aren't that many men who have a heart for the youth. But Benjamin Crawshaw does, and you are going to be blessed by this conversation. My name is Anna Murby. This is Honest Christian Conversations. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you for spending your time with me today. For all returning listeners, I'm glad you're back. After the episode, please leave a review for the podcast if you haven't already done so. If you have, thanks so much. I appreciate reading your encouraging comments. They help me improve the content for you all. Want a shout out on the next mini-sode? Check out the links in the show notes. Thanks for your support. God bless and enjoy the show. Benjamin, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk with me today. I love the videos you've been doing for The Path. I watched the first one and I was choking back tears because I resonated with it, and I binged watched all of them. I read the first chapter of that book, which is also very amazing. I never got into Pilgrim's Progress, although I did go to a Christian high school, so it was something that was required reading. Right. But I just didn't find it interesting. But I did find this very engaging. And your ministry, Trueface, is amazing as well. All of this to say, I guess I kind of somehow resonate with Gen Z for some reason. And I don't even know what Gen Z generation is, but I know I'm not it because I'm in my 40s. So I think I'm the tail end of millennium. I don't know. But I know I'm not Gen Z. So it's funny, but I just resonate. I think it just harkens back to the days when I was younger, and I really wished I had something like your platforms to speak to me in a way that I really needed. I am ready to jump in and hear everything you have to say of how you got involved with Trueface. But before we get to that, give us a brief overview of how you came to Christ.
Well, we can talk about all of it, Anna. We can talk about it all. And I'm not in Gen Z either. So I grew up in a Christian home, preacher's kid. Going to church was fine. I loved the people at my church. I just had absolutely no interest in following Jesus. I wasn't opposed to it. It just go to church on Sunday, say hey to everybody, really small church. Everybody was really sweet. I loved them, but it just never crossed my mind to connect it to Monday at school. So all growing up, that was just, again, I wasn't mad. I wasn't anti-God. It just wasn't my thing. I guess your typical preacher's kid.
Apathetic, I guess.
Apathetic.
Maybe a little.
Maybe people talk about, I think sometimes it felt irrelevant. And I thought God was the emperor up in the sky. So I just didn't think God cared about my Tuesdays. I didn't think he cared about my dating life. I think he wanted me to pray and read my Bible and go to church. And then after that, we were kind of done and I could move on with the rest of my life, and didn't really see how he was interested in any other part of my life. And so again, it wasn't, irrelevance is the best way I can think of it. And so it was the summer after my freshman year in college, and on the outside, things were going pretty well in my life in college. And my old student pastor said, we're going to our summer camp that we took the youth group every year. And he said, we need a chaperone. So I'm aging myself now, Anna. Back in the day, we had chaperones. Remember those days, right? They call them like small group leaders now, but back in the day, they called them chaperones. And he said, we don't have enough chaperones. Can you go? And I said, well, am I going to have to miss a week of work? And he said, unfortunately, yes. And I was like, I'm in. Sign me up. So I was in charge of the 7th grade boys. I did a terrible job as far as being a chaperone goes. And there was a guy up there speaking who was just red-faced and angry the whole week, just letting us have it. I don't know if you've been to one of those churches where the preacher
Probably,
is
yeah.
mad at you. But
Yeah.
somehow the last night, Holy Spirit just got a hold of me through this red-faced, mean preacher and brought me up to the altar, and I laid down, and I was just at the end of myself. I was tired of my life being all about me. I mean, all my relationships revolved around me. All of my thoughts revolved around me, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I was just miserable. And so I went up, I'm like crying. My 7th grade boys are like, what happened to Benjamin? Are you okay? And I got up and never the same after that moment. It
Wow.
really was. I knelt down at the altar and stood up, and life has never been the same since then.
Praise God. That is
Yeah.
that is awesome. Your story reminds me of my son who's 13. He's kind of meh,
Yeah.
he goes to youth group. It's like pulling teeth telling him, hey, you should read your Bible,
Right.
spend some time with God. He wants to have a relationship. And he's just like,
Yeah.
he's just he's not there yet. So
Yeah.
your story gives me hope that maybe it'll happen just
Right.
the way that is supposed to. So that is wonderful. And I am noticing a trend that you seem to really enjoy being around the younger people.
Yes. We were talking this past weekend, we had a retreat, and we were talking about, where you feel this kind of special, like what tugs at your heart. And, everybody has these different groups of people that come to mind when you think about, oh man, somebody should get involved with them. I started working in student ministry when I was still a teenager. So 19-year-old, I started working at a camp. My sister signed me up and, agreed for me to do all these things without me knowing about it. And so I was in between my sophomore and junior year in college, working with high school students who were exiting their junior year of high school. And it was like that from the beginning, that was where God was pulling me, was towards teenagers. So
that is the reason why I had to have you on during my tribute to masculinity, because there are not many people who say they have a heart for teenagers. My pastor's the same way. He loves teenagers. He's like, they're annoying, but he loves them. And you guys kind of are about the same in that whole area of you just have a heart for them. He started out in the youth group and now he's the pastor of our church, but he still loves the youth. And that is not something you hear very often from any Christian. I think it's like, sometimes they go, I'll go there, but it's not really what I want to do. I'd rather do this. But that's the next generation. They need to have people, especially ones who care.
Right.
It is important that they see that you care. So I think that's why you have thrived so much in it, is because you care and they see that. I mean, teenagers can smell it when you're not authentic. So
you better believe it. You absolutely better believe they can. That is so true.
Yeah. So tell us about Trueface and how you got involved with them.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell a very long story in a very short period of time. But I graduated college, worked at a small church in student ministry among 55 other things, went to a big church, worked in student ministry, then went to a parachurch ministry where I was working in the high school camp ministry, which was a big part of my heart because that's where I came to know Jesus, was at a camp, So a big passion for weekend retreats and summer camps. And so I started speaking a lot, the D Now, Disciple Now weekends and stuff. I was kind of the flavor of the month there for a little bit when it came to in the student world. And I wrote a book for teenagers called Know God, Know God, and did really well. And then I wrote another one and it did not do well at all. And then I wrote another one and nobody bought it except my mom and my aunt. And then we launched a camp and it lost a ton of money. So things started unraveling, and then simultaneously things were unraveling at home at the same time. So I kind of went on this collision course of trying to hold things together at work, trying to hold things together at home. And it was all kind of unraveling in front of me all at the same time. And so then got divorced and then kind of stepped out of any kind of formal ministry, which, makes sense, and really went into, what we would call a valley season. I'm not comparing myself to Moses, but I just wrote a series on Moses. So he's kind of top of my mind. But, Moses out in the desert,
wandering around.
he had.
I completely get that.
Yeah,
I had my own situation like
right,
that too after a
right,
big mental blow and thought I was going to be doing a ministry and it didn't pan out. Just you're wandering around, you're trying to
right,
figure out what am I supposed to do now? What does God want me to do now? So yeah, I
right.
completely get that.
I think Elijah, he was doing these things in ministry, and then he fled to a place called Beersheba, and he was out there, and then eventually God said, "Go back." And a really funny set of circumstances how God had me go back, and I wasn't mad at God. I wasn't mad at the church. I just was keeping my distance. So
Mhm.
it was God and I were good. It was just all y'all I had a problem with because I had trusted you and you had hurt me. And I just was dealing with my own wounding. If you weren't related to me, it was, I wasn't unfriendly. It just, my arms were crossed. And so in the second half of COVID, there was a lot going on. God was beginning to help me learn how to grieve and peer under the hood of my own soul. But my work, I was struggling to find work for the first time in my adult life, and reached out to Robbie Engel, who's the president of Trueface, and was like, "Hey, I'm reaching out. I've never done this before. I'm not good at this, but if you have anything." So he started sending me these projects to edit. And so at one point I called him. I said, "Hey, who is this for? Like, I know some of these ministries, y'all have like what do they call it? Like a psychographic. It's kind of this person. This is the target person." And he said, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's Brad." And I was like, "Well, tell me about Brad." And he said, "Brad is a middle-aged, stuck Christian." And so he started to describe Brad. And I was like, "I think that's me. I think I am Brad. You're talking about me." And so I'm editing, and God worked it out in only a way that God could. It's like having me be the chaperone at a camp where I come to know Jesus, right? It's like God's having me edit these resources that are targeted to me. And so then Robbie started wrangling me in a little bit more. Can you go from 10 hours a week to 20 hours a week? And he's pulling me in, and I get to know the Trueface staff. It's a very small staff, but they absolutely practice what they preach, which is, high trust, authentic community where we can be known and experience, grace and all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, 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 let's take it easy here. But I think they were really patient with me as I learned to uncross my arms and connect the dots between loving God and loving others, and trusting God and trusting others. So I'm a big fan of Trueface because I am Trueface. I am the Trueface demographic, and really helped me walk my way out of the valley back into engagement with the community and with what God's doing in the kingdom, his timeless kingdom. So
That's awesome. So what kind of demographic does Trueface work with?
yeah, historically it's been for everybody. It started 30 years ago, and they started off working with business leaders to create these high trust environments. And then some point along the way, they wrote a book called The Cure that you may have heard of. And this was really about for people who had spent a lot of time in the room of good intentions and exposing them to the room of grace, and talk about the difference between living in this performance-based walk with Jesus where you're doing everything for God versus doing things with God, And so they had reached just a lot of people who felt stuck, had not experiencing a ton of peace and freedom in their lives. And so then, it was a lot of different ways, some small group studies, some in the church, a lot of stuff for individuals. And then Robbie and I, who both have teenage kids of our own, started thinking, well, what do we want to say to our own kids? It started with our biological kids. He has a couple teenagers. I have a teenager and a 12-year-old who's kind of like a 30-year-old. So she's kind of she's a tween. She's like a tween middle-ager. You know what I mean? And then it kind of expanded out to the students in the student ministry I work with. 30 students in the student ministry I work with. And then by the time we were done, I was doing a ton of Gen Z, Gen Alpha research, a ton of it. Another lady who worked with us, who's a professional counselor, did a ton of work and research with Gen Z. All of us were doing a ton of work. But by the time we were done, it was just a project for everybody.
Yeah.
And so it really was, if you're 15 or you're 50, the path. I don't know if you've seen the cover. The cover's pretty too.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous cover.
It's for anybody. But this was part of what our attempt to reach the next generation, because we had reached a lot of believers who were stuck, but that represents a lot of years of maybe walking in performance, walking in religion, where we're like, what would happen if we caught them before all of that? What happened if we got to your 13-year-old son before he got, or we got to him while he was still, as you say, meh, trying to figure it out. So that was the big goal.
Yeah, and you absolutely nailed it. I was looking through the website for Trueface. I love that you've got groups and everything, and you can see that you just want to engage. That's what the whole website is engaging, come alongside people, help them out of their stuckness, their legalism, which I was steeped in for many years until I was 30 years old. And I'm still chipping away at some of it now. Yeah. It's a process, but it's definitely, by God's grace, I have been leaps and bounds different. Yeah. But yeah, the path, my goodness, that's probably a book I'm going to definitely get and have my son read. And I would love to have my eldest read it too, but she's kind of going through her prodigal child phase, so she doesn't like reading anyway. But maybe I'll just have her watch those little videos, because they were enough to choke me up, all of them so far. Yeah. And yeah, I can see how it resonates with everybody, because I think, like I said, it resonated with me because of who I once was and what I wish I had somebody say to me back then. And of course, teenagers, they haven't gone through anything yet, but you're doing to them what I wish someone would have done to me, you know, and maybe they won't appreciate it right now, but at some point while they're going through things, they're going to remember, you know what, I read this somewhere, or I heard this somewhere, and it's going to resonate. And they're going to be like, oh my goodness, this was from back in the day. I remember that. I got to get out of this situation that I'm in. So it's evergreen material, apparently, because it resonates with 40-year-olds who have 5 kids, and also with young people too, which is, God is so good. That is so beautiful that he can make that happen. His word does not return void. It doesn't matter what age you are and how far you've gone. Yeah, I love it.
No, I appreciate all of those kind words. I think these truths are timeless, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just, the maybe the sequence, maybe that's not a great word, but the path, the steps along the path may be a little bit different. So when I started in student ministry, the student ministry I was working with at the time, who had 4 students, by the way. So they were a band, by the way. So it was nice. I was out there, they would play some songs, and then we'd switch places, you know. It was called Insight, which INCITE. But so after a while, changed the name to Sons and Daughters, because I was thinking, what is it that I want? If I only have a limited number of things that teenagers could remember, by the time they're done with youth group, I want them to understand identity. You are sons and daughters of King Jesus, and he's a good father. So along this journey with Tal's the main character, the architect, taking this leap with Jesus, the first step after that is the table, which is all about identity. Well, for me, and Anna, this may be true for you as well, when I took that leap with Jesus at camp, it immediately went into 2 different things. One was like trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus. So you trust, and then you get involved. You start doing things. Well, I'm realizing that I still hadn't really gained clarity onto what my view of God was and how I think God viewed me. I still kind of saw God as the emperor up in the sky, but I was just getting more gold stars than I was before. But I didn't see God in the way he describes me. I have it up there, chosen, holy, dearly loved saint. That's out of Colossians. And seeing that I'm a loved son of King Jesus, who's a good father, and that is my identity as his son is not something that can be stripped away. It can't be earned. It can't be taken. That is true of who I am as a follower of Jesus. I'm, sealed by the Holy Spirit. I am his kid. I am his child. And really starting there, that's where we started on the path. Because if we went straight into, trust, it's like, well, who am I trusting here? I'm trusting God. well, I'm getting a lot of different pictures about who God is. And I'm hearing a lot about who God is and who is God. Well, anytime we start looking at our creator, then eventually, it shapes our identity. The creator and the created, they go hand in hand. And the same with vice versa. How do I see myself is typically connected to how I see God. So we started there. That was one of the places that we started that was different from how I grew up, which before we get to faith, before we get to learning and what it looks like to grow or what it looks like these gifts of spending time with Jesus, before we get there, let's start with who you are as a son or a daughter of King Jesus, who is a good father. So the truths are timeless. We just started there as opposed to starting with faith, as opposed to starting with more knowledge and more behavior or something like that.
Yeah. Hey friends, are you looking for a community where you can grow deeper in your faith? Maybe that's not quite your thing and you like receiving emails that encourage and edify you because you can do that on your own time. Did you just realize that you have a special occasion approaching and you need a unique gift fast? Well, be prepared to get excited because Honest Christian Conversations has you covered on all these things. Join the Facebook community and connect with fellow believers who are seeking to deepen their faith. I'm in the group, so we'll get to chat too. Sign up for the mailing list and stay informed about the podcast and receive weekly challenges and Bible verses designed to equip you spiritually for the coming week. I don't know about you, but I could use more spiritual equipping during my weeks. When you sign up, you get my free 7-day devotional as a thank you gift. Explore the store and discover the handcrafted items that are inspired by my favorite Bible verses. There are some fantastic conversation starter pieces in that store that everyone's going to love. They're not just about the podcast, but they are most importantly about Christ. Now that you have stopped jumping for joy, join the community, the mailing list, and check out the store. I appreciate your support. God bless. Identity is something that's definitely important to know. I mean, nowadays, the way they're throwing things out, they're trying to, the colleges and high schools, elementary schools are trying to shape what they think you are or what they say you should be. And everyone's questioning their identities in more ways than they should be. And it's no more, it is very important nowadays to actually know what your true identity is, because we're all searching for truth. We want that absolute truth. Some people say they don't, but then you say, well, how do you know that you don't really want absolute truth? How would you know? So everyone wants some absolute truth, and we all need that anchor of, who we are. It's what we're all looking for. We want to know, why are we here on this earth? Am I really just here to die one day and turn to dust and that's it? No one wants to live for that. You have to have something to live for.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and you could speak into this too. People have said, well, now we're in a post-Christian culture. So what is it like now to try to reach the next generation? And I say, well, in some ways we're in a post-truth culture, right? Now, my kids, your kids, Anna, they have access to more information than we ever did. So information is everywhere. What's true, what's not true. And so what I think becomes of higher value is authentic experiences. Can I have an authentic experience that's real? What you said at the start of this podcast, they can just see right through it if you're inauthentic. Absolutely. Because they're getting fed information, but a real authentic, something real and authentic, that the value of that is elevated. Well, that's the gospel, right?
Yeah.
That's when Jesus walked around, when Jesus met the woman at the well, it wasn't a bunch of information. It was an authentic encounter. And then she left knowing just a little bit more, but not a ton more. And she became the first missionary to Samaria, So it was Jesus asked a lot of questions. He told a lot of stories, and he did very little preaching, right? But he looked people in the eye. He listened to them. He asked them questions. And so I think that's what the next generation is searching for. And I think that gives us maybe more freedom than it did in the late 90s and early 2000s, where it was get a bunch of people to show up for the pizza party, and then, you can talk to them about Jesus or something like that. Now it's like, no, you can be as real as you should be or as you are, because if you're not, they're going to see through it. So you might as well show up as who you are. If I'm going to talk to my students about identity, well, I better check myself, right?
Yeah.
to show up as a loved son of King Jesus who's a good father and not find my identity in any other aspect of what I'm doing. And so I can just show up as myself. And sometimes that just means me saying, I don't know. Sometimes that means me opening up about, it was a tough week for me. And I'm not like TMI oversharing with my students or anything like that, but
Yeah.
modeling authenticity to be like, yeah, I don't know. We're in this together. I don't have any answers for you on that, but let's journey together and talk about it. And I think that has an even higher value than it used to, and has an even higher value than me saying, here, let me give you some more information. They got a lot of information right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They want someone to care. And if you don't care, they know it, and they're not going to trust you. They're not going to open up to you.
Yeah.
And working in a student ministry, it is very important that they know you care, because that's where you can build the trust. That's where, like you said, you can plant the seeds of what their true identity is. And that's where you can start building this relationship where you're sharing the gospel with them in full. And then maybe they're more willing to trust God because he sent them somebody who's showing them what Jesus is really like.
Now you sound like a student pastor. You sound like a really, really good student pastor. I don't know what you were saying at the beginning about like, hey, that's not my calling. But did we record what you just said? Because that was you get the soundbite from your own self on your podcast, not the guest. Because
well, I think it's because I didn't feel that when I was in youth group or even the college years. I think that's what I was missing. I had all the knowledge. I'd been going to church since I was a little kid. I knew everything. I knew all the Bible stories. I was very legalistic. I was very good. I didn't question things. I didn't have any doubts, quote unquote, because if I did, I was a bad Christian. Like I didn't have any of that stuff. I was the good girl.
Right.
And nobody noticed me whenever I went to youth group. The pastor's daughter always gave me the stink eye, and I have no idea why, because she never even talked to me. It was a big church that I went to at one point, and every single Sunday they kept asking me if I was new. And it's like, nope, I was here last weekend. No one ever sat with me. I was super shy and quiet. It was a really awkward experience for me. And I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel appreciated or anything. Like by the time I was able to start driving myself to college group, I only went if I felt like it. No one was going to keep me from going. I have my own car. I don't have to go, I don't feel like doing this. And I think I just missed that authentic connection from a church family that truly cared. It wasn't just about numbers or having fun and playing the games, making the kids excited to come. There was no substance there.
Right.
And I think kids are wanting substance now. They've been oversaturated with stimulation, with all the things that are, inauthentic, the fake reels and everything. Ooh, I got it all together. And people are just getting overloaded and they're tired of it. And everyone just wants something real that they can hold on to, that they can go, you know what? This is truth. This is real. I need this. And I think that's what I missed in my youth years. So maybe that's why I can speak to that now.
Well, you're speaking to it powerfully. And
thank you.
And yeah, everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah, how do I double A into that? Whatever.
I'll talk to your youth ministry anytime if you want.
Yes.
I've been through some stuff. So, but yeah, I think people who are pouring their hearts and their time and their effort and authenticity into the youth today, in my opinion, I appreciate them. I don't know how everyone else feels, but you all should have more hats tipped to you for this, because it is not easy, especially with all the things they're able to learn, all the things they can find on the internet, even if they're not really looking for it, pornography. These kids don't know what it's like to have to go catch the phone that's ringing and it's on the wall and you can only go so far with the cord. They don't know what that's like. They don't know what it's like to hear that really obnoxious, high-pitched squealing of you getting on the internet. They have it. You don't have to go to a dictionary anymore to figure out the things you want to know. You can get online. You can go on YouTube. Their world is so different from their parents' world, from anything, and they probably think that we just can't relate to them anymore, and it couldn't be further from the truth. We all, at the end of the day, we are all the same in the fact that we all just want to be loved. We want to know who we are and why we're here. And yeah, if they can see that you're a real person who doesn't have it all together, and I think they can trust you a little more.
Yeah. It's really, I mean, I have a boy in my group, awesome kid, shy, quiet. They got a soccer match where they're playing in the state tournament and showing up. It's just this is like student ministry 101 from back in the day. You show up and it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge impact just to show up in their lives, And so I do think, again, to the point that you're saying, when you're talking about the dictionary, the internet, all this so then it becomes, it's like eating fast food all the time, right? And then you start like, I'm kind of craving a home cooked meal. I kind of want a salad. I never want a salad, right?
Yeah.
Inundated this way, and I just want something different from that. And this is what the gospel offers. This is what authentic community offers. It's something so different from AI or fake news or all this stuff that you were talking about that's being thrown in front of them. And so we carry with us something that is perfectly positioned for the next generation. So we're talking about a generation of people who have information overload. They're looking for something that's authentic, and it has to do with an encounter that's real. Well, that's Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Is Jesus is perfect for the next generation. And so that's why we did this too. The experience guide is because, like, my students, the Path Experience Guide is to create these physical experiences. About half the students in my student ministry read, the other half wouldn't read if you paid them to read. That's why we have those animation videos that you're referring to. And so we can meet in a group. We can watch this 5-minute video because some of them are not going to read the chapter. And then it's not like just a couple of discussion questions, but we get to actually live it out and play it out. We talk about shame, and you can write down on a dry erase board some of the messages that have been given or you have attached to about who you are, and these negative messages. And then we speak truth over each other, where we can mark those out and replace them with truth that comes from God. And one of God's favorite ways to speak is through other people, speaking truth over your life. We have this affirmation exercise that we do at the very end, where you speak some affirming words to each other. And that's just a huge deal for people who just don't hear that very much, which are teenagers these days. I guess adults don't really hear it that much either, for that matter. But
it's a beautiful ministry, getting involved with youth. I was actually involved with the youth for a little bit before I had I think it was my third or fourth child. I can't remember.
Right.
But I look young enough to where a couple times people thought I was in the group, which I guess is kind of flattering, but also embarrassing.
Now you're noticing I wasn't here last week,
Yeah.
All this when I was a teenager, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I enjoyed being in the youth group. I would have loved to have stayed, but as two of my kids were getting older and I knew they were going to be joining, I didn't want to be their mom hanging out in their youth group. It's like, that's your space. I understand. I'll back out. So yeah, I was like, I'm not going to encroach on their territory, because they might need that space where they don't feel comfortable telling me things, but they might feel comfortable telling somebody else.
Right.
And but it was always a blast to be involved. I mean, we had parties where you could wear your pajamas. We had dance parties. They did silly things on the stage. Are there any stories you can tell us about things that you do in your ministry that are silly, or sometime where you remember something really funny that happened?
This is just the first thing that came to mind. We do have a few kind of yearly, kind of annual traditions. So when I first started, and again, it was pretty small. After a couple years, we worked up to like, I don't know, 11 students or so, and it was Super Bowl Sunday, and our student ministry starts at 3:30, and the Super Bowl is usually like 6:30 Eastern or something like that. So we still have our youth group, and so set it all up like this football theme, right? And so then I was like, all right, we're going to play football, and so split up the two teams, and we started, and they're looking at me like, what do we do? Like, have you never played football before? And they're like, no. I was like, have you ever watched football before? And they're like, no. I was like, are you going to watch the Super Bowl? And they're like, maybe, I don't know. And so I was like, okay, this is not the football crowd, which is totally fine. We'll figure out what crowd this is, and we roll with it. So this year now, which is like 5 years later, Super Bowl Sunday, we played football again, and it was like half the students really got into it. So we decided next year we're going to do like a full on, we're going to paint the field. There's a couple of guys in my church who are going to be refs. And then some of my other students are going to do the halftime show. And so we're going to have our full on Super Bowl at youth group. It may work, it may not work, but we're going to give it a shot. We just started working on our own like little kickball field for people who want to do kickball, making it a little more of an official looking field. So just your classic student pastor taking things and trying to make them a way bigger deal than they actually are. But it's not, we have, people who like to get out and play games. And part of me creating these games is to get people moving a little bit for their own mental health.
Yeah.
Some of my students, they've just been in their room, on tablets and devices all week. I'm like, even if you don't play, just get up and move around, get outside, look people in the eye, make interaction contact. But we have all kinds of like, this art set up where we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff artistically. So it's not like, hey, play a game or you can't do anything.
Yeah.
We have these outlets. However, on the Super Bowl Sunday, I'm like, you're going to have to either be a fan or you're going to have to play or you're going to be a part of the halftime show, and you're going to have to come up with what that is. So it's going to be pretty because they're entertaining. They really are. They're awesome.
I remember my son last year in youth group, they did a costume thing around Halloween and like a contest, and they gave the winner a little trophy. My son won, and that was his first year in youth group. So he was really pumped about it because he's short and shorter than everyone else. And everyone always says you don't look like you're 13. Well, he was 12 at the time. He dressed up as Frodo Baggins, and like he had the whole get up and everything, and he won, and he was so excited. And they did like this big presentation for him and everything. And he was thrilled. So yeah, youth group can be super fun. It can be a blessing to these kids because maybe that's the only time they get to see that someone cares. So it's wonderful that you are involved, that you have such a heart to want to do this. For Trueface, is that a ministry opportunity that anyone can get involved in?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So if my audience is listening to this and they're super pumped and they just want to get involved, where would they go to do that?
Yeah. So you can check out anything at trueface.org.
Okay.
But to look at the stuff that we've talked about, taking a look at a little bit of the animation videos that you've talked about, the Path book, the Path Experience Guide, trueface.org/the Path. So that's trueface.org/the Path, THEPATH. So you can see a sample chapter for free. You can check out our animation videos, see what the experience guide and the book is all about. And I think, to me, the experience guide is even more powerful almost than the book. Now, some people, they want to read the book and be like, let me check this thing out and see what it's all about. I totally get that before they're like jumping in. But for people who want to live out these truths or maybe question or talk about these truths, we really did work very hard to create actual experiences. So to move things from the left side of your brain to the right, into your emotions, into your body. So I do, for, people like your son who involved like their student ministry doing something like that, an experience guide might be a way to engage his heart that other things aren't grabbing a hold of right now.
Okay. So it would be a good tool for student ministry to try to do.
Yeah, we're halfway. All the animation videos are almost done. We're done with 4 of them. So I'm waiting until we're dropping one per week over the next 4 weeks until they're all done. I'm waiting until they're all done, and then we're going to start the Path Experience Guide with the student ministry that I work with. But yeah, I think it's super powerful because you can watch the video as a group. It's 5 minutes long. You don't have to, like I said, wait on them to make sure they did their reading to show up ready to talk about it. You can just watch it and then jump right in with your discussion and these interactive, immersive experiences.
Okay. So I have one more question before we go. Would those videos be something that an 8-year-old or younger would be watching? Because I have an 8-year-old who she asks some pretty deep theological questions. And yeah, I think she might like it just because visually they might like the videos. I just didn't know if it was something that you thought people with younger kids might get something out of it too.
Yeah, I have a 7-year-old, and yeah, I would watch these videos with her and see if she had any questions that came up out of it. Now, Tal's journey, the main character, into seeking success and then finding it to be unfulfilling and looking for other options, that's probably not going to connect with people who haven't experienced a lot of disillusionment in life. But especially once you get to episode 3, once Tal has taken the leap into identity, into trust, into shame, into community, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was wondering because I was like, these are cool. I'm going to make my kids watch these.
Might as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt. There's so many non-good shows nowadays. It's like anytime there's anything good, it's like binge, child, binge. It's okay.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, Benjamin, so much for coming on and talking to me today. This has been a very encouraging conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Friends, did you enjoy the episode? I'm so glad to hear it. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or my website, honestchristianconversations.com. Your reviews help boost the podcast in the ratings, so let's make these honest conversations more accessible to those who need them. Be sure to follow the show so you never miss another episode. And while you're doing that, why not share the podcast with someone? If you want a shout out on the podcast, or to join the community and mailing list, and to check out the Honest Christian Conversation store, the links for all these are in the show notes. Once again, thank you for spending time with me today. I look forward to our next conversation.